There are three different types of research methods that are used in psychology: descriptive studies, correlational studies, and also experimental. In this PowerPoint or video, we will cover descriptive methods as well as correlational. Descriptive research involves describing or collecting data. There are three different types of descriptive studies that we are going to look at: case study, naturalistic observation, and survey. The first descriptive method is called a case study. A case study collects data on one person, a small group, or some event. To gather information in a case study, one would conduct interviews. One example of when a case study would be used, or has been used, was in the first school shooting in Columbine High School, Colorado, in 1999. That was a big shock to the nation at that time. Sadly, we've been desensitized since, but that was just unthinkable in 1999. A case study would have been used to collect information about the two perpetrators who were among the 15 that died. Interviews of teachers, friends, parents, or any other acquaintance would have been valuable. One advantage for using a case study is that you can gather a lot of information. A disadvantage for using a case study is that info that you collect may never apply to the larger population. For instance, the reasons that the two boys in Columbine did this horrific act may never apply to a similar situation after. The second type of descriptive study is a naturalistic observation. This is just simply watching people in their own natural environment or setting and recording their behavior. One advantage is that you will get good, uncorrupted information. If people don't know you are observing them, obviously they will act normal. One disadvantage is referred to as observer bias or researcher bias. We all like to be correct. Someone making an observation may misconstrue a particular behavior that they see to support and prove their theory to be correct. The third descriptive method is a survey. A survey is simply an opinion-based questionnaire. Many of you have probably been involved or been asked to take part in a survey before. An advantage of a survey method would be that it's really cheap, especially if you're going to use the internet. Since it's anonymous and people do not have to disclose their identity, you assume that people are telling you the truth. You can target a very large population. Here again, you could use the phone or put it out on the internet. A few disadvantages of using a survey. Sometimes you get low response rates. A lot of times people just don't want to take the time to participate in a survey, especially if it's quite lengthy. Also, people lie. Even though it's anonymous, people might give inaccurate responses. Instead of really reading the question, they may just get lazy and start filling in A, B, C, or D without even looking or reading. Wording effects. You have to look at who is actually putting out the survey. A lot of times, interest groups will put out a survey and word questions so that they can get people to answer supporting with their agenda. When using a survey, you want to use random sampling. Computer-generated random sampling is a good method to use. The population is the group that you want to learn about. For example, when the school I teach at now consolidated with another school, I put out a survey the first year. So the population I was interested in learning about would be teenagers. sample are the people who actually take the survey. So in my example, I was looking at teenagers or students at Mountain Ridge. You also want to make sure you get a good representative sample. You want people from all different subgroups, for example. I wanted to make sure, I used random sampling so I could get males and females. I wanted to get different ages. If I gave that to all seniors, the response may have been negative because you have children who went to a particular high school for 3 years and now they have to graduate from a new school. Whereas freshmen may not have been as negative towards consolidation. You wanted to look at different regions. You wanted to make sure you had different communities representing in the survey, not just the communities where the high school was located, but also include other towns or communities that were much further away and students had to drive a great distance to get there. I wanted to make sure also I had students who were in extracurricular activities and may have made friends with students from the other school as opposed to those who were not. The second type of research method is called correlational research. A lot of times, correlational research builds from a survey. Here you're just looking for a relationship between two variables. You're not trying to explain why or what caused the other. A couple examples that they use in the book. First of all, we find, based on surveys and statistics, in areas where ice cream sales are high, murder rates are also high. So there's a positive correlation between the two. Does that mean people who like ice cream commit murders? Who knows? Correlation just shows relationship. It doesn't say that one causes the other or explain why. Another example they use in the book. Bald men tend to have longer lasting marriages. Does that mean bald men are more sensitive and make better husbands? Who knows? That's just based on statistics that have been gathered. So again, correlational research just simply shows a relationship between two variables. A few different types of correlation. First of all, positive correlation. That means the variables rise and fall together or go in the same direction. If one variable increases, the other increases also. If one decreases, so does the other. And as I said, a lot of correlational studies are based on surveys. So let's say you put a survey out for students and you ask, what is your GPA and how many hours a week do you study? One would assume you would find a positive correlation here. An increase in study time would also cause an increase in GPA, or a decrease in study time would cause a decrease in GPA. Again, that is a positive correlation because the variables are going in the same direction. On the other hand, with a negative correlation, the variables go in opposite directions. So if one variable increases, the other one decreases. If you put out a survey and asked about drug use or social networking and your grades or GPA, one would probably find a negative correlation. An increase in drug use or social networking would probably negatively correlate with a decrease in grades or GPA. One goes up, the other goes down. There's also a zero correlation. The closer you get to zero, the less relationship you will find. So zero correlation means you found no relationship whatsoever. A correlational coefficient is a number that represents how strongly two variables relate to one another. That number can range from a -1 to a +1. Look at the chart in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide. You can see that a negative one and a positive one are a very strong relationship. That would mean 100% fall into that category. But since we're dealing with people, that is highly unlikely. For example, a positive correlation. If every person had an increase in study time relating to an increase in grades, that would be a positive 0.1, 100%. But we all know those people who don't have to study. It just comes natural and they still get good grades. Again, we're dealing with people, so you're never going to see a positive one or a negative one. Again, that would mean 100% apply. A positive 0.5 or higher would be roughly 50%. That's pretty strong when dealing with people. Again, the closer you get to the middle, the 0, is the weaker the relationship. It means you've found no connection between the two variables. Psychologists would use what's called a scatter plot, which you can see to the right here, where you plot the different scores from the survey to see whether or not they have a positive or negative correlation. Again, the top picture and the bottom picture would show a positive 0.1 and a negative 0.1, 100% applying, which is not going to be the case. There would always be a few outliers. You may see a question on your exam that asks which of the following would be a stronger correlation. So if you look at the numbers, first one you have negative 0.13 or a positive 0.38. So what you're looking at is the closer you get to 0, the weaker the relationship, the closer you get to positive 1.0 or negative 1.0, the stronger the relationship. I think it's easier to just convert them to a percent. So 13 or 38%, which is stronger, obviously 38. 0.72 or 0.59, 72% would be stronger, so negative 0.72. Negative 9, negative 0.91 or positive 0.04, obviously 91 would be higher than 0.04. And finally, an illusory correlation. This is where people think there's a relationship between two variables, but there's really no data to support it. It's kind of like a myth, and somebody has mentioned it before, so we believe it to be true. For example, a lot of teachers will say that when there's a full moon, children have more behavior problems, so that behavior problems are related to lunar cycles. No data to support that. A lot of people believe that if you go outside when it's cold, you don't have a hat on, or let's say you get wet and you're damp, that you will get sick. And we know that that really isn't true either. You have to be exposed to some bacteria or virus or pathogen to get sick. So that's an illusory correlation.